Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn more at uber.com/flexibilityworks.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw, coming to you from the nerve center of the CHEK news empire here in Victoria. Lots to talk about this week. Another candidate ejection from the BC Conservatives and our first floor crossing from BC United to the Conservatives, which has ramifications all over the place. We're going to bring in the pod squad to break all this down. Jillian Oliver, Jeff Ferrier, and joining us again, Carly Pachinik here. Thank you, all of you, for being here on a notable week in BC politics, a big week. Well, it has been speculated for a while now, and it has finally happened. The first floor crossing from the collapsing BC United Party to the surging BC Conservatives. Lorne Dirksen, Caribou-Chilcotin MLA, first elected 2020, currently the caucus chair for BC United and the critic of emergency management, land, rural development, a bunch of things, has crossed the floor, jumping ship to join John Rustad and the Conservatives as we speak and as we record this right now. So let's start there. What does this mean, Carly? That's a big development in BC politics with lots of ramifications.
I think floor crossing is one of those things where it's kind of like sausage making. Like, you don't want to know what went into it. You don't want to see what happened to create the final product. I think that there must have been some incredible discussions and backroom dealings and feedback from the riding for him to make this decision 6 months out from an election after spending 3.5 years as a really, I would say, beloved member of caucus chair, like you said. So, I mean, aside from, having direct insight of what actually was said in those discussions and what his riding's been saying to him, I can't imagine that this was a decision that was easily made. And, but to that point, it's one that you can't really come back from. So it's a gamble. Like, you got to really hope that that huge gamble that you made paid off, because all of those relationships and familiarity that you've built with your colleagues is that's incinerated. That's not, you can't go back on that. So crossing the floor, I mean, not for the faint of heart, and I'm really curious to see what happens with that, because that's especially now after all this time.
But typically, like a floor crossing, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the history is that person, fails to get reelected when they go up to voters again. Although the dynamics here, Jillian, are so different. The Conservatives rising, United sinking. Like, maybe that's not really a play here. What do you think of what's happened?
Yeah, I mean, like Carly said, I don't know what happened with those negotiations, but if I had to guess, I would say that feedback from the local riding and maybe even polling from that local riding played a big role in the decision. And I think if we see any more, that'll be the same, that it's a lot more about these people, these MLAs trying to save their seats and trying to save their jobs than anything else. I think, the last ditch effort by Kevin Falcon that we talked about last week was obviously a disaster. And I think the other piece of it is that people are, really finally losing faith in his leadership. But like Carly said as well, at this point where, you had John Rustad and Bruce Banman booted from caucus so long ago, you had all of these BC United MLAs, receive the nomination to run for re-election, stand with Kevin Falcon, even criticize the Conservatives, stand with him while he has made critical remarks about them and really strong critical remarks about them. I think, it's hard to see this as anything other than them just trying to save their seats.
Mm-hmm. And even just a couple days ago, I think in his social media feed, Dirksen was criticizing the Conservatives sort of publicly. So it's not something that whatever has happened very recently and changed his tune. Jeff, let's bring you in. What do you think?
Well, let's be clear. This is the third floor crosser for the Conservatives. It's a party entirely of floor crossers. Rustad was given a little help out of the way at the start by the BC United who gave him the boot, but he crossed the floor. Banman crossed the floor. He was a BC Liberal initially. Now he's a Conservative, and Dirksen is the third. It's a win for the Conservatives, obviously, because you got Dirksen, who's a sitting MLA. He brings credibility to the BC Conservatives, helps advance this narrative that BC Conservatives are the best choice on the right to take out the NDP. It's a loss for Kevin Falcon and BC United. Folks at home might be wondering, hey, Jeff, you're wearing a tie. Why are you wearing a tie? You never wear a tie. Well, my mom taught me that I should always wear a tie to funerals. And this show seems like a bit of a funeral for Kevin Falcon and his leadership with BC United, because you're losing a sitting MLA, you're losing your caucus chair, someone who's well-liked. You're going to face more questions about your leadership, more calls to resign. And I would be shocked if this were the last of the floor crossings. And that's bad news for Falcon. For Dirksen, this is about, I expect, about personal ambition. It's about saving your job. It's about saving your seat. There's been no discussion in any of these talks about Conservatives and BC United, about the grand principles, the rationale for folks at home for why this is happening. It's been all about us winning government, us beating the NDP. That's all it's about. So he's moving from the fringes of BC United to a potential leading role with the BC Conservatives. Now, normally I'd say floor crosser ought to quit, seek re-election with the new party in a by-election. But given that BC Conservatives seem to be made up of people who were part of Andrew Wilkinson's campaign in 2020 as candidates and in the back rooms, the only difference now being that they're saying some things out loud that they used to say in secret before, probably not necessary.
Let's go around again, Carly. Like, can BC United survive this, I guess, is the sort of question. If there are other floor crossings, the party still exists. It has money. Does Falcon survive this? Does it increase the pressure on him to resign? What sort of flows from this type of floor crossing, do you think?
The BC Conservative Party's not new. Like, it wasn't just created yesterday. So he's had all this time to do this. And, in terms of the BCU surviving, I mean, that's the voters will say. We haven't really had, unless I missed it, any super concrete foundational platform announcements. There's been a few, but there hasn't really been anything to that impact. 6 months, also, a lot of things can happen. A lot of changes can be made. I do know that BC United's candidate vetting process is much better than the BC Conservatives. I don't think anybody on this screen could disagree with that. So, I think we talked about this last week too. The more and more we hear from the candidates and hear about them, I think is going to be really interesting. We don't know anything about these candidates. We haven't heard them speak. We haven't seen their faces aside from a picture on the internet. So who are these people? And I think a lot of that is going to show itself in the next 6 months. And I think that'll also that'll have a much bigger influence than Lauren Dirksen crossing the floor, I think.
Yeah, we'll get to one example of that in a moment. Jillian, though, to close off our crystal ball future gazing, if this is the beginning of some floor crossings, what pressure is put on Falcon? How does BC United kind of limp forward from this? What do you think the implications might be?
Well, he's got to make some decisions. He's got to decide if he's going to nominate more candidates, another BC United candidate in these ridings where these crossings are occurring. He's got to decide, right now, last week he was saying that he was trying to join with the Conservatives to defeat the NDP. This week he's come out swinging against the Conservatives. I think he's got to get really clear about, how he's going to justify to people that he made that switch of, saying that it's okay for Rustad to be premier in 1 week, and then the next week saying that they're a clown car, I think he called them. I think, and convince voters that he stands for something and what he's really offering other than defeating the NDP, because I think Jeff mentioned this last week. We have some other polling we're going to talk about, but the NDP still has decently high approval ratings, especially David Eby has high approval ratings. So I think he's got to kind of figure out, like, what kind of party is he leading running into the election. And same for the Conservatives. I think that's the biggest question mark and is going to be the most interesting thing to see. Are they going to continue down the road that we saw them in the legislature talking about, banning books in high schools and talking about canceling SOGI and all of these sort of, social conservative sort of fringe issues? Or are we going to see them sort of try to capture a more mainstream position as they head into the campaign?
Mm-hmm. Jeff, close us out on this.
I'm going to say real quick, Eleanor Sturko, this is your moment. Here's your moment. Step into the breach of leadership on BC United's side. I've been calling for it. I feel like it's been for months and months and months. Time to salvage something on the BC United side. Step forward. Take over that mantle of leadership, which is rightfully yours from the start. And
would it be enough, though? Like if they switch leaders now to her anyway?
Yeah. It's a nice bit, but it would not be enough. The primary is over on the right. The BC Conservatives have established themselves as the opponents who will take on the NDP in this election, and the chips will fall where they may. And if you're a BC United sitting MLA, you're thinking things through, like Lauren Dirksen has, and you've got choices to make about where you're going to land. And I suspect that Mr. Dirksen is not the only person thinking these things through and thinking about what political banner he wants to run under in the next election. But we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, it's an interesting reference to the idea of a primary, because I think BC United was hoping to hold on to much of the material that they think they have on Conservative candidates and apply it in the election, and has panicked and started throwing it out and creating this, too late for them, Conservative right-wing primary that they already appear to have lost. And an example of that coming through the Courtney Comox BC Conservative candidate, Damon Scrace, who resigned in disgrace. You see what I did there? With this? Anyways.
Well done.
Amid criticism that he had posted homophobic tweets, all sorts of vile stuff. I'm not even going to bother actually repeating it here because it's ridiculous. United had put together a 56-page dossier of this young guy's social media trolling. Again, I'm not even going to get into it because it's not actually worth us talking about. But John Rustad told me it was a failure of vetting. It strikes me it's kind of a failure of judgment in appointing an idiot as a candidate, frankly. That would be my take on that. But is there something that the Conservatives can learn here? Was this an example of an old candidate versus a new direction, kind of Conservatives on the verge of maybe, striking at power? Carly, what do you make of this candidate and what happened here?
First question, how it's 2024. How is this still happening? How are we still clutching our pearls and shocked when something like this happens, when we are chronically online and we're a society that is chronically nobody, you're telling me that no single person part of the BC Conservative entity saw this and was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. I think this, I truly am still shocked that this kind of stuff happens, because we've been online for 20 years, posting our thoughts and feelings and opinions, and seeing what happens positively and negatively. I don't know. I think, and I also think to that point of saying that this is a failure of vetting, Rob, I think you nailed it. It's not, that's leadership. And we've seen this previously in many different iterations in politics. It's not the moment that a leader blames somebody else for something that the buck actually stops with them. I think that's an indication of what kind of person they are and what kind of campaign we're going to see, what kind of leadership that person would provide. At the end of the day, the leader's the one signing the paper. So you can't blame, a group of 22-year-olds who were doing some internet research. The buck stops with you. So I think obviously the candidate, that piece is ridiculous and shocking that it's still happening, but also we're also avoiding responsibility for the names that we're signing our names to. I think that's also ridiculous. So.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And according to United, this material was online, available for the Conservatives to vet when they named this gentleman as their candidate in January. Jeff, this is the third Conservative candidate to get the boot or have to quit because of extremism. What do you think?
Well, this isn't about vetting and something slipping through the cracks. This is about duplicity and weakness. So you've got the duplicity lie. Like they did know, right? They did know. If I can Google a fella's name and comments about certain groups of people being degenerates is the first thing that comes up on my screen. Conservatives knew, and they accepted it. They accepted the extreme statements until it became politically inconvenient for them. And even then, they didn't apologize for the statement. They didn't say that they were wrong. They just said it'd be a distraction and we needed to move on. And it's troubling for me because it shows that a leader in a party willing to deceive the electorate about their true intentions. They're not just harboring regressive views like these. They're trying to smuggle them into the mainstream under the cloak of respectability. But then there's also this weird weakness thing. Rustad reflexively, whether it was this fella or Dr. Magneto, the candidate who thought vaccines made you into magnets, at the first sign of pushback from the public, spinelessly capitulates to the pressure each time their views are exposed. And it's kind of pathetic, right? This is a leader, if you remember the Dr. Magneto fella, in his initial news release to the public, he was touted as a champion of medical freedom who pushed back against the medical orthodoxy in the service of patients. But then as soon as someone says, oh, that's kind of wacky, Rustad immediately, despite initially saying, that's the views that I want in my party, that's the views I want to champion, vacillates, cuts them loose, and just puts his head down and hides. And it's hardly the material of which premiers are made, in my view.
I think what's happening here, and this is just my take, is that Rustad, the way that he was ejected from the United Caucus over descriptions of his views on climate change, he felt he got a raw deal there, that his comments were taken out of context. He didn't get to defend himself. And he has this reflexive reaction, for example, with Dr. Magneto, where he thinks people who are being persecuted for their comments deserve to be defended. And he pushes that into the candidacy to the point then it goes public and it is indefensible and the party has to yank it back. And so you have this disconnect between the leader and his sort of his whatever, and then the party being like, oh, we can't possibly defend this, Julian. I don't know. It's just my take on the dynamic, but it puts the party in this position here of having to, force the resignation of a candidate in Courtney, who then goes out online right afterwards and says, I never apologized and I stand by the things I said, even though I issued a statement expressing regret and saying I don't believe in those things anymore. And it creates this weird disconnect.
Yeah, I think that's probably, it makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a good reminder that we don't always have, or we never have, probably completely rational actors making these decisions behind the scenes. Leaders and other people making these decisions bring with them their experience and biases. And that's kind of how we end up with all of this stuff. But I also think a big thing driving this dynamic is that the Conservatives have found themselves in a place that they didn't actually ever think was going to happen. I think, you described, Rustad got booted from caucus. He sat as an independent for a while. Then he decided to cross to the Conservatives because he got to be leader. Then he just got lucky and got a second MLA to cross the floor. Then he got official party status and got a bigger profile in the legislature, because then you get to ask questions in question period, seats on committees. And, they've also been able to ride this federal Conservative wave to the position that they are in now. So I think when he started out as leader of the Conservatives, he was sort of just hell-bent on sticking it to BC United. It was sort of like a pride and revenge kind of type play where he was hoping to just, become a little bit of a protest party. But now he's finding himself polling in this situation where he's like, has the opportunity potentially to be official opposition in a different type of party than he originally envisioned. And so he's nominated the most amount of candidates out of any of the parties. He did that quickly and obviously, both without vetting, but also I think without much strategy and without much of an eye to a winning strategy. And now they're kind of trying to make up the difference now that they find themselves in this new position, and they're getting more kind of donors and mainstream Conservative strategists jumping on the campaign because they think that it's a more viable option than BC United. So I think it sort of shows that they are making things up as they go along, and they also don't quite know what they stand for. And I think that's why it's going to be so interesting to watch, to see where they land. And man, I just wish that I could hear the conversations happening behind the scenes, because I'm sure it's fascinating for them to be trying to figure out, like, who are they going to be running and coming into this election.
Mm-hmm. There's two versions of them, right? I think it's an excellent point that they rushed to nominate, more than 60 candidates after Christmas at a time when they were still looking like they were third place, and then have vaulted into second place, in some cases challenging the NDP, getting money, getting people in, more professional organization. And now they're version 2.0, where lots of people want to run for them, really, really good candidates, because they think they might win. But you've got a bunch of candidates like this Damon Scrace guy who have been sitting there at a time when it was easier to get a nomination. So that dichotomy of the Conservatives is something I think we will be talking about in the future. Let's move on, and we can continue to thread this through if you want, with a new poll from Angus Reid. I believe it's the 7th in a row now in BC politics, showing kind of roughly the NDP are in the 40% approval range if decided voters had an election today. The Conservatives around 30%, United in the mid-teens, the Greens in the lower teens. The actual numbers, I think the trend line is more important here. This confirmation from Angus Reid, a big reputable polling company, that the Conservatives are surging, as we've said, and United is collapsing. So that's the big takeaway. But there are other things in this poll on leadership, on trust, on words that the public associates with leaders, all sorts of interesting things to go around on. Jeff, anything jump out at you?
So you have this fascinating dynamic of people generally liking the premier, thinking he's the right person to deal with the issues you care about most: housing, affordability, and healthcare. You've discounted the natural opposition party in Falcon. You don't like them, but you're open to hearing from this third fella. And I don't take their support in the polls and these polls as hard. I am definitely going to vote for Conservative. I think it's folks saying, I'm tired and angry, and I'm open to hearing from somebody else. And if that person can come forward to me and strike me as someone who I like and trust and has a credible plan, then I'm willing to vote for them.
Another busy week in BC politics. Thank you to the panel for breaking it all down. Thank you for watching and listening. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, on CHEK Plus, and on your podcast feeds for all the latest. We will be back next week breaking down everything that's happening in BC politics here on Political Capital. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn more at uber.com/flexibilityworks.